everyone, Bryan here from Sounds Profitable, and I'm super excited to bring you through another product deep dive this month. Today we have Dave Hanley, CRO of Libsyn's AdvertiseCast marketplace. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Bryan.
So Dave, I'm such a big fan of AdvertiseCast and what you guys have done. I mean, I think that Libsyn, having been a hosting platform that's been around forever, and AdvertiseCast having been one of the stronger sales teams in podcasting, combining is really exciting. And when me and you first talked about doing this product deep dive, on my end, I didn't know what there was for a product. I mean, like, I've been through the website, I've had a chance to dig through it and see that it can show some publishers up there, some podcasts and what they have available. But me and you have had a chance to talk through it a little bit. And this is a really cool piece of technology. It's the AdvertiseCast marketplace. And that's what we're going to go through today, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Bryan. So, quick history. The system actually was, probably one of the first advertising marketplaces in the podcast industry. It was started around 2017. And essentially, right out of the gate, it was actually developed to be a fully self-serve platform from both the advertisers and the publisher side of things. What we soon found out is that, especially, several years ago, there was an appetite in the marketplace to have a little bit more of like a full service offering. So we
Yeah.
essentially, tweaked the platform, added, a really great team around it, and that's what really fueled our early growth. But the platform has been really huge in terms of really giving the podcasters, one place to go to get everything, take a look at campaigns, see what's going on, respond to opportunities that come their way, see how they're getting paid, all that great stuff that really streamlines the workflow. And then, now that I think podcasting has made leaps and bounds in terms of the number of advertisers that are actually in the space, we're definitely looking more, toward the future when I think the self-serve piece is actually going to pick up more steam and is going to become a little bit more the norm in the space.
I completely agree. I think marketplaces are really interesting, especially in all of advertising, but specifically in podcasting, because what they enable is for both sides, like you said, to interact with each other, either through managed service or directly. But in podcasting particularly, I think they've taken on a little bit of an order management flow to it, which is really exciting. I see so many features in
Hmm.
a marketplace that if I was a publisher managing my own inventory, seeing some of the order management systems out there, I might want those tools made available to me locally as well. But what's neat about marketplaces, a lot of them, is that they can be agnostic. Now, it's always beneficial for a company to lock things down, have it associated between the host and the marketplace, so you have to tie everything together. But AdvertiseCast history outside of Libsyn was completely agnostic, right?
Yeah, correct, Bryan. So, since day one, we've really been all about, hey, let the podcaster do their thing. They can be on whatever, hosting platform they choose, but we're here in the background to really support all the aspects of advertising, for that podcaster. And even after we became part of Libsyn, just over a year ago, actually, it was like a year ago last week, we still kept that same philosophy. So although there are some advantages to being on Libsyn and working with us, kind of from a streamlining the workflow perspective. We're still agnostic. We'll work with anybody as long as they're on a, IAB, platform in terms of hosting.
That's something really important to point out because I think after the acquisition, it's easy to assume that AdvertiseCast only works with Libsyn publishers, but that's definitely not the case from what I've seen talking to you and what we're
Hmm.
going to go over today. So we're going to start on the publisher side, right? Because that's the one a
Correct.
bunch of you are listening for, to figure out how to get your inventory listed, what you can do with your inventory on there, how you can learn more about ads, and then we're going to go into the advertiser side because, like you said, as podcasting continues to grow, advertisers are becoming more and more savvy. And so it'll be easier and
Hmm.
easier for them to pop in and start a campaign on their own.
Absolutely. So why don't we get started here? I'll dive in as a podcaster or a publisher. And like you said, I'll flip over to the advertiser side to show you what it looks like, from that perspective. So to get started here, I'm actually logged in as, this actual user here, Dave's podcast. What I'm going to do quickly first is just go up to my tools here, and I'm actually going to come down to the My Podcasts option. And it's really important to note that the system is set up for not only an individual podcaster, but also it's set up for networks. So somebody that might have 2, 3, 4, 20 different podcasts under their umbrella. Um, and while I'm in here, I can actually go ahead and just add a podcast. And what I've actually done here is I've just kind of grabbed a URL or a RSS feed, I should say. Let me just go ahead and copy and paste that in here. And I'm just going to import that RSS feed to this fantastic show from Sounds Profitable. And what that does actually brings over all the information from the RSS, the cover art, the description, those types of things. And then really all I need to do here is set up the advertising specific information, that I need to really complete this listing. And so, very simply, I can go and put in, number of downloads per episode. Of course, massive audience for, the download here, 100,000. Now, one thing to note is that when you do set up your listing and when you update the reach on your listing, you have you have to actually upload reach verification. So today that consists of essentially screenshots. We're actually working on a method to have a more automated, integrated approach to that. Obviously, if a show is hosted on Libsyn, we have direct, visibility into that. So reach verification is really for shows that are, on another platform that we actually don't have access to.
I think that's a really healthy way to go about it, right? Because right now you're being as agnostic as possible. So I see PDF doc, JPEG, or PNG as file types that you'll accept there. So, the IAB guidelines help us generally saying that this is a trusted partner, but that data export isn't going to be the same across all of them. So that means that your team goes out of their way to manually verify everything that's uploaded to make sure that this is accurate, that someone is putting in the right information.
Correct. And sometimes honestly, it's not like, we're necessarily looking for bad actors. I think in some cases, somebody might say, hey, what's your average downloads, per episode on a 30-day number? Perhaps they had one episode that was a massive reach and they're kind of skewing those numbers. And we might look at it and say, hey, you know what? I know you put in 100,000 here, kind of based on what we're seeing here, it's probably safer to go to 70,000, just kind of on an average. And really what we tend to do is kind of shoot on the low side so that we can actually over deliver for the advertisers. From a baked in perspective, obviously when it comes to dynamically inserted spots, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, but even still, if
But
you
I'll get to that soon.
if you overshoot on your reach and you can't deliver, then the campaign isn't complete.
Exactly. Yeah. So we definitely want to always, kind of err on the low side and then over deliver, kind of giving the advertisers a bit more, bang for their buck essentially, and making sure that, we kind of surpass that when we can.
Perfect.
The other thing you may have noted when I actually went and added this podcast is that there was actually an option to actually add a YouTube channel. That's something that's definitely kind of a new focus for us as of late. A few months back, we actually acquired Podcast Ad Reps or PAR, and they actually had a lot of content that is kind of what we refer to as simulcast. So where they have a podcast that maybe has 50,000 downloads an episode. We've got YouTube that's basically the same content put out on YouTube that might get another 20,000. So we refer to that as simulcast. So that's something that we're actually looking at kind of as a holistic a holistic reach of say 70,000 in that instance. So that's where that simulcast would come into play. And then essentially our system will look at, the combined reach between the podcast and the YouTube. And we actually now are actually doing some standalone YouTube stuff as well in terms of, like a baked in, spot on a YouTube video.
I think that's incredibly smart too, because podcasting is open, right? And it's about community and it's about identifying all the people that have consumed the content. And that's really powerful. So when we take that data in, we know, that audience travels with that creator. YouTube is its own closed marketplace. The pricing is adjusted to what that closed marketplace is because a lot of those creators built off of YouTube haven't been able to leave YouTube. So when we think about this with the simulcast aspect, blending it towards podcast numbers is really powerful. It enables these podcasters to become creators, and every company out there that allows for monetization on both sides, it's a home run, right? It's enabling someone who has had a killer podcast to say, hey, it's time to expand into video, maybe into a newsletter, maybe into all these other things, because podcasting is part of the creator economy, not just a standalone channel. So kudos to you guys for really diving into that. I think that we're going to see some changes from YouTube in the future, but I think that companies
Hmm.
that prioritize viewing the both of them as relevant ad platforms are really going to help podcasters win.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just looking at YouTube as another, area that people are consuming podcasts, which is great. Um, so in terms of completing this setup here, really all I need to do now is set up, the frequency of publishing. Let's say this is a weekly show. It's, 20 minutes to an hour, publishing on Monday. Um, and then really you need to set up what it is that you're actually offering for sale in terms of ads. So you may have, some pre-rolls, some post-rolls. Um, you want to specify who's actually doing the reads. In most cases, on our platform, it is the hosts themselves. And then really we offer three different types of podcast ads. There's the, kind of traditional baked in ad, which is really just an episodic in content spot. There's a dynamically inserted ad that can take a couple different flavors, but there's two options. There's one that's episodic and one that's a catalog. And you see if I select these, two different options here, let's say baked in, dynamic, or catalog, the system gives you a couple different options in terms of how you actually set that up. Um, and so obviously the one thing we all struggle with in the podcast world is that there's no real standard. So we actually try here to say, hey, here's kind of the three different ways that we generally sell, these ads to give the show a little bit of guidance in terms of like, here's your different options. Very often we're actually talking to the podcaster themselves, asking some questions like, hey, how, if they've never done ads before, how is your show consumed? Does it have a lot of back catalog? Does it not? What platform are you on in terms of maybe delivering dynamic ads versus not? So we try to really custom tailor the approach to each show because not all shows are created equal in terms of how can we best maximize the monetization there.
Now you mentioned post roll, but I see up there it's just pre roll and mid roll. Is post roll allowed? And how do you define pre roll and mid roll? Like personally for me, I've come to hate the pressing play and immediately into 2 minutes of ads. So I find that pre roll after they've introduced themselves, like what the show is, what we're doing before you hit the meat, seems to be the sweet spot. But do you have any guidance on that? And do you support post roll?
Well, we don't sell post rolls. That's not even an option or a system. From our perspective, post rolls are generally something that we look at as like an added value,
Okay.
which can kind of be added onto a campaign. So we literally don't have an option for somebody to go in and buy a post roll because we don't think there's a ton of value there. So we tend to stick to, primarily the mids and then secondarily the pre rolls. From a guidance perspective, we always recommend to shows that those pre rolls are in content. So, after the intro within the first, few minutes of the show. Obviously, it depends on how long the show is to define what a pre-roll is. Um, and then again, we often try to, give guidance in terms of, hey, what number of spots should you have in your show, depending on the length. Obviously, it's always a push and pull of, hey, we want to help you make as much money as possible, but we also don't want to alienate your audience
Yeah.
so that they hear so many ads that they get turned off. So that's always a delicate balance, of
But
course.
it's smart how you accept that data in there so that you can get a general idea of what's being sold around your ad, not just your ad. So that if
Hmm.
somebody flags that they're allowing a substantial number of ads and yours is just one of four in a spot, you guys might want to reach out and have a conversation with them. Or if they're only putting two ads available and you guys are selling them out nonstop, it might be the opportunity to help coach them through where to add more ads.
For sure. Yeah, and actually that's the approach that we take, especially with a show that's kind of new to podcast advertising. We tend to start on the low side, get to that point where, hey, we're having a hard time here finding inventory, and then we'll maybe bump it up. We'll start with two and then add three maybe down the
Well,
road.
that's a good segue to ask the
Um,
question of new shows. Like, how small of a show can work with the AdvertiseCast platform?
yeah, so previously the way we had kind of looked at the advertising world was that a show really became interesting to an advertiser from a standalone perspective when it hit about that 10,000 downloads per episode number. But we've since kind of changed that a little bit because about 6 months ago, we acquired a company called Podgo, and really their focus is on kind of long tail, smaller show monetization. And now we can accommodate shows as low as, a few hundred downloads per episode because the approach is what we're doing is those shows are kind of being bundled together into, different bundles such as maybe female skewing audience, male skewing audience, certain genres, etc. And then we're actually taking that out to advertisers and saying, hey, we've got 200,000 downloads here across, say, female skewing podcasts. We can give you very organic, really engaged audiences, and it's a really great offering, and it's something that we're actually still really going to market with. David Ehrlich, who started Pod Goes on the team now, and he's really focusing on that. We call it our emerging podcasts. And it's really great from our end because we're finding a lot of really great, kind of diamonds in the rough here. And from an advertiser perspective, I think that's a really great offering. They can reach, a bunch of different audiences across many, many shows. So right now the number is, quite small in terms of the shows that we can actually work with.
That's really smart, because a marketplace in these mindsets require more hands-on activity, right? Like, so a marketplace isn't programmatic in the sense that, when the advertiser says, I want to buy this, they just put the ad live and the publisher just gets the ad and it's already in their platform. There's still at least two people that are interacting to get the ad going in this scenario. What you're doing by grouping those on the long tail is really exciting, because some podcasters are going to want a little bit more control. They might want to do host read. They might use it as the opportunity to build their reel, or to grow, or to have a strong relationship with yourself. And even more so, as these ads perform, as these categories perform, there are going to be specific shows that overperform compared to their peers. And while they may not still have the giant download numbers, there might be a niche advertiser that's perfect for, and you guys are uniquely positioned to help pull them up into the next rank of advertising.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So very simply here, I can specify what ads I want to offer here. Let's say I'm going to put in a 60-second mid-roll. We kind of give guidance in terms of the CPMs here to say, hey, if you want to kind of go a little on the lower side, maybe 23, higher side 27. We recommend starting with that 25. And I'm sure you've seen Bryan, and actually it was almost like a discussion with you that prompted this concept was, we're pretty transparent in terms of what our ad rates are out there. And it's based on the actually delivered ads in a given month. And it hovers right around, in around that 25 range. We do see certainly some, different variables that maybe push that one way or another. Certain types of content, certain audiences, show in really high demand. So we do have, CPMs as low as like high teens, as high as 40, 45, 50. But that 25 number is really where those 60-second mid rolls tend to hover. And so the other thing I can do here is I can kind of spruce up my listing a little bit, putting in some details about the host, because keep in mind, this is what's going to get presented to the advertiser when they're actually reviewing the podcast and saying, hey, is this a good fit for my brand? So a little bit about the host is always good, a little image. And then we actually have the ability here for the host to put in some more details about themselves and about their appetite for different advertisers in different categories. For example, some of the more taboo advertising categories we ask right here, alcohol, gambling, adult related, et cetera. And then sometimes we also want to ask, do you have children? Do you own a home? Do you wear glasses? So, certain categories like that, we want to kind of ask that up front so we can get some intel on the hosts.
Well, I have a
and then a really
question
great thing.
real quick
Ahead,
on
Bryan.
that, on categories. So, right now as we're recording this is June 2022, and we're hearing a lot of uptick in interest in political ads and podcasting. So what is AdvertiseCast's current stance on them, and is that something that'll be added to a category to select yes or no?
I mean, right now, I tend to see the political ads being more of like a programmatic play. We're not really getting too deep into the political side unless we have somebody reach out that's an advertiser that's looking to go on one specific, show or certain types of shows. Maybe it's left leaning or right leaning to talk about certain issues or candidates. So we kind of deal with that as like a one-off, and that's obviously always up to the host, just like any host read campaign.
So that's more agency style that's coming through. We're not seeing it as someone using the platform intending for self-serve to buy political at scale.
I mean, we do have that scenario, but again, that's always going to go to the host, and they have the ability to, say yes or no to those opportunities as they
That's
might come
awesome.
in.
Okay, so this is just
Yeah,
pre-screening. You just remove them from them
exactly.
because those
Yep,
are very popular categories, and it's
for
just to
sure.
cut
Yeah.
down on bandwidth. That makes tons of sense.
Exactly. And this is really, again, we'll get into more of the workflow after in terms of how opportunities come across the table for a podcaster. This is more for, for our team if they're actually putting together a campaign for a gambling client. They can pre-screen out those shows and say, you know what, this show, these 10 shows said they're not interested in gambling at all. So I'm not even going to send them this opportunity just to kind of save the
Yeah.
cycles there and make it a little bit more of a nice
I
user
feel I
experience.
feel like I have to buy a cat because I can check off all the other ones on the often our
There you go.
advertisers would like to know. And so,
Exactly. Looks like you got a good
right,
you'll have a
good
good
spread.
appetite
Yeah, I
here,
wonder
and
how
it
many
should lead to lots of
adoptions.
ad dollars for you.
Wonder how many adoptions that led to for the pet adoptions for you guys.
There you go. Um, so the next piece here, obviously, we always tell podcasters, quite often advertisers are not looking to buy your show, they're looking to buy your audience and access to that audience. So it's really important here for the show to set up some audience demographics. And obviously, if they have an audience survey, putting that information here from that survey is fantastic. Age, income, education, gender, that type of thing is always really, really helpful. So I mean, that's kind of the basics of setting up a listing here. I'm not going to, walk through all the nitty-gritty details here, but that's how you'd go and actually add a podcast to your account. And then from our system perspective, that actually goes into a workflow to our internal publisher team. They review that. If there's any questions or any details that we need to dig into on the reach side, we'll do so. We have a couple other, due diligence related type of, tasks that we look at, and then we basically approve, that request, and then that can be available for sale.
Which is
Um,
neat because this moves it to like an order management like flow at that point. I mean, if you're a podcaster in the tens of thousands of downloads per episode, you're receiving emails from agencies and advertisers and all these people trying to place ads on your show.
mhm,
What this is not your email inbox. It's a streamlined place that says, I am available. Here are my terms. Would you like to
mhm.
interact? And that's the flow from here. So you've set yourself up. The AdvertiseCast team is motivated to get you in front of as many people as possible, whether it's through those groupings that Dave talked about or the individual sale, if it's the right size or the right fit. And so as a publisher, the next step on here is when I receive an ad, right?
Correct. That's it. So, like you said, Brian, in this crazy podcast advertising world, there's a lot of emails flying around. In terms of like opportunities, IOs, vetting for different brands, ad copy, and we found that that can be really frustrating for podcasters, and it can lead to a lot of mistakes. And unfortunately, mistakes mean make goods, which means lost opportunity and lost monetization. So as the podcaster here, I have a single place that I can go to within the system. That's my dashboard, which gives me an overview of everything that I need to know that's going on currently. So for example, at the top here, I've got, a review of any proposal invite. So that's like a vetting for a brand to see, are you interested or not? Essentially, in this case, we've got one that's come up, and it's, the team's given them an overview saying, hey, here's what this client's all about. You in or you out? Now, at the same time, when that vetting goes out, there's also an email that goes out to the podcaster that looks like this, where they literally just go in and say, I'm in or I'm out. So that's a really, really easy way for them to give us that feedback in terms of, that opportunity. And so in this case, I say, yeah, I'm in, click the green button, and, I'm all in on that one.
And then from there, the next step happens where I receive either the talking points or the asset or the tracking or any of the things related to getting the campaign live.
So that first step is actually the pre-vetting. So that's just an opportunity where it's like, hey, this brand reached out, they're interested in your show, they're looking for, business podcasts. And typically what happens behind the scenes, the sales team might, add, 15 shows into this and say, hey, let's see who's interested in working with this brand. Because what we don't want to do is just give the advertiser a list of 15 shows and they go, oh, this is great, I'll take them all. And then we come back to them and say, hey, sorry, 7 of these shows aren't interested in working with you, because that's
Yeah.
not a great experience from an advertiser perspective. because it starts to raise questions like, hey, why not? Are we not,
Yep.
are we not desirable? But the other scenario is, we also use that pre-vetting to look at any category exclusivities that might clash. So our sales team has actually a tool in the system that can show all of those exclusivities, the time periods when they might run out, so that if a meal kit delivery service is looking to come onto a show and they already have one, well, we don't present that to the advertiser because that's not gonna be a go.
Now that's awesome that you're able to do that within your own system, but do you enable any sort of feedback? If I were to click decline on that for like the health app that you just showed, and I can explain, I already have a direct deal with another health app outside of AdvertiseCast. Is that something I can give feedback on or anything there, or is it just simple yes or no?
There is actually, yes. So that you can have actually other, there's kind of like a simple workflow that can come into play with those vettings, where that was a very simple like check, or
Yeah.
X. But you can also have another question prompted to say, what about this or what about that, or tell me more about this if you're interested or not interested. So we can get a little intel on that too.
That's really great. I encourage you
Hmm.
guys to gather as much of that as possible, and then we can be talking
Yeah,
through the data on that because it's going to be really
absolutely.
interesting to see
Yeah.
what publishers really do and why they say yes or no to a
Hmm.
specific ad.
Yeah, and from a data perspective, what this also gives us is actually if you look at the system from like a power user, salesperson perspective, you can actually get some insight into like the appetite level for a certain show, like how open or how closed they are to opportunities. So we actually have intel into that. We can see, hey, what has this show been declining and what has this show been accepting, which
Yeah,
is really great and saves us a lot of time.
that's very cool.
Yeah. So the next box down here, now that I've accepted that opportunity there and said that I'm interested, the next one down is actual orders that have come in, in through the system. And so you can see here, I've got two clients, Yellow Chef and Tomato King, of course, fictitious advertisers in our test system here. I have the ability here to go in and actually say, hey, let's take a look at this one for Yellow Chef, review the order. I can take a look. The details are great news. We got the order in. Um, you can actually see right in the system because it's part of the order whether this order will require any pixel tracking or attribution tools to be set up. And in this case, this one actually does have that. You'll see here we've got 4 ad spots that are part of this specific order with the date specified here. Um, and you'll actually see really all the details you need to know here. Now, if you have a question as the podcaster, you can go in here and say, hey, I have a question. And you can actually communicate directly with either our team, if we're the ones that are managing this campaign, or directly with the advertiser, if they're the one managing the campaign. So that's something that's really great because it leads to not as many kind of dropped balls and miscommunication because everything is right in the platform here.
Got it. So
And then
so
this,
in that situation where they're looking for a 50,000 reach per episode, if for whatever reason I'm already overbooked and I don't quite have that, that's a great way to say back to them, I have 30,000
mhm,
or for whatever reason, or hey, I have more. I'd love to evaluate doing, 100% share of voice, or
yep, sure.
that's a great way to continue that conversation going.
Mhm. And then here I can also approve and decline directly in the system. Let me just go ahead and approve this. I mean, often, a podcaster will say, really excited about the campaign, um, and give some feedback that way. These are the spots that are booked here. If they need to modify those, that can be done, at this point as well. And then any modifications to those dates will obviously be communicated, back to the advertiser side here too.
And if I change those when sending that back over and hitting approve, then the advertiser has the chance to approve it again before accepting it, right?
Yep,
Cool.
exactly, exactly. So back to the dashboard here, you'll see, so I also have one more order to review to approve here. And then you'll really see your upcoming ads. So you have the ability here to take a look at, hey, by dates, what do I have actually coming up here? So June 13th, 20th, 27th, and these are the actual spots themselves. So in this case, if I just kind of go in and say, hey, let's take a look at this one for the 20th here. Let's just actually dive into that detail.
So pending moves it to approved, and or sorry, pending makes it available, then it will show up in approve if they decide to move forward. But approve directly
Exactly.
moves it
Yep.
into the in progress ones.
Yeah, and that's going to put it right into the calendar, lock in those
Very cool.
spots, and you're all
Okay.
good there. And so this is an example of a campaign that's ongoing. You'll see here that, I've got 4 spots. One of these has already been completed. The other one's coming up on the 20th. Um, Now, if I just drop down here, this actually gives you the ability to actually listen to the air check, and obviously that gets passed over to the advertiser. Previously, in the kind of the early days, it was actually up to the podcaster to go in and actually mark that air check for each spot that they're doing. Since then, we've actually automated that. So we've got an integration with some AI tools that go out, grab those spots, automatically put them into the system so the podcaster doesn't have to actually go in and mark those complete anymore, which is a great, savings in the workflow for them.
I definitely agree. Yeah, I think that publishers being responsible for that stuff sounds good in practice, but it's easy for them to fall
Yeah.
behind. And then you guys are stuck in the middle. So automating that is fantastic.
Hmm.
Has it helped catch any, oversight or mistakes or need for make good?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of the double-edged sword of automating that is that it gives us a bit more insight into, what's going on. So the tool that we actually use not only grabs the air check, snips it out, pops it in the system, it also checks the length, the position, the promo code, all that great stuff. So what that gives us is direct insight into, kind of quality control. We can kind of be ahead of the curve and saying, oh no, they used the wrong promo code. That happens, unfortunately, the odd time. Or hey, this was a little short. Let's beef up the length. Or it was the position was wrong. So it gives us some insight into that, and if we need to look at a make good or something like that.
That increases advertiser confidence.
That's it. We want to find out before the advertiser does, basically, and that
Yeah.
helps.
It's the
Um,
advantage of a marketplace. That's why they don't go direct.
exactly. Hmm. And then the other thing you can see here is you just sit down on the messaging. Again, I talked about this earlier. This is an example of, hey, the ad copy was uploaded here. Scott came in and gave me some great feedback. They loved the first spot. If any updates to ad copy happen, they just occur through the system. So again, nobody's dropping the ball in an email and saying, oh, sorry, I didn't get the email with the latest ad copy. It's all, collected here right in the system.
Very cool.
Yeah. So let me go back here to my dashboard. Let me check if I have anything else here. Now, the only other piece that we've got that's in the dashboard that's not showing on this dashboard, just by virtue of the data that I've got set up here, is that our workflow is essentially that you obviously accept the order, you run the spots, the system will do the air check, and then 30 days after that point, the podcaster needs to go in and actually report the reach on that spot. Now, again, that's something today that they need to do because we obviously want to make sure, hey, the client bought 50,000 downloads. What did they actually get? And obviously, there's a make good process that can trigger on anything that's under delivered. And then the other thing to note is that's something that we're looking at automating right now as well, so that we can actually tap into the download numbers. Obviously, there's a lot of platforms that we work with, so streamlining that across the platforms is what we're actually working on, so that that step can be eliminated too. So basically, not only will that allow us to get that 30-day number and obviously beyond that, but it'll also allow us to give some real-time insights into the advertiser to say, hey, after 7 days, like, where's this one at? Is it, out of the 50,000, are we at 30,000, or is it at like 45,000?
Yeah.
So that's a great feature that's going to be really handy.
That's really exciting to hear.
Let's take a quick look at the schedule, because obviously one of the great things with having the system, in the hands of the podcasters is that they can actually maintain their schedule here, which makes it a lot easier and more streamlined to place buys because we know what's available within the system. And here you can actually see the schedule. If I just drop this down, this gives me kind of a detailed view of all the advertisers that are actually upcoming. If I have something that I need to change here, so one opportunity I have is, hey, I usually publish every Monday, but I have a special episode coming up, which is on like a Wednesday in August. So I can actually go ahead here and add an off schedule episode so that the sales team knows, hey, great, we got some more inventory to sell here when we're actually looking at the show. The other thing I may want to do is say, you know what? I was actually looking at taking the August 15th off here, so let me go ahead and edit this and actually just remove this episode, from the calendar, just so that the the communication in terms of what's available is all streamlined there. So that's another, nice capability here in terms of having this all, integrated. The other
And
thing
if
you have the
I
ability to do as a calendar is actually go and export that availability. So if you wanted to export it into an Excel to provide to, someone to take a look at it, you can do that as well.
And I can also, if I were to have sold outside the platform, I can mark that down here so it's not incorrectly showing that I
Exactly.
have an available
Yep.
slot.
So that's a good point, Brian, because out of our couple thousand shows, we have some exclusives where everything that's going on that show is actually flowing through our platform because we're the exclusive seller. But we have a lot of shows that are not exclusive. So that's really important is that if they go in and they said, hey, I actually sold this July 11th spot, what I can actually do is add that spot in here so it comes out of the availability. And when shows manage their entire schedule in here, that really helps our team and really helps us kind of maximize for them. So that's a great point. So look at the schedule. Really, the last piece here is on the payout side. So obviously, as a podcaster and you're running ads, you want to know when am I going to get paid, right? So that's a key aspect here. Obviously, this is a kind of a brand new, amazing Dave's podcast that I set up here. This gives me direct insight into the payouts, when they're happening, when they did happen, so I don't miss anything. So this is a really great, a really great area because very often, I can imagine if you didn't have something like this, you'd be getting a lot of emails and a lot of calls about when, payouts are showing up. And then you also have the ability here, if you do have a question about something, you can click this form, put in an inquiry, and that goes right to our finance team. So this is really important. You also have the ability to export this into Excel if you need to use it for your accounting, and really just gives you a consolidated view of when everything's paying out. And we have, one of the things that's really important to us is having a very streamlined process so we can get podcasters paid as soon as possible within our platform.
That's great. Being able to see that can allow you to really alter your business and make sure that you're going in the right direction. So
So now I'm logged in as an advertiser in the system. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, the system was built right from day one to essentially be a full self-service platform. And the advertisers have, the ability to come in, set up an account. Now we actually have like a approval process where if you come in just as like an account off the street, you can have access to kind of a subset of the information. But we have the ability to then enable that to what we call premium access, where they can basically go in, you know, essentially we kind of enable them to be able to buy really anything in the platform. And they have the ability to do really everything from start to finish in terms of a campaign. So with the marketplace, they do have the ability to, find the shows that they're looking for. Obviously, in this test system, I think I have, 15 shows. But you can imagine as an advertiser, if you had, several thousand, that can potentially become a little bit overwhelming. So we allow a lot of options like, hey, I want to put in just a quick search here for business. What do we have from the business, in the business show category? I can just kind of put in these search words, or I might want to put in things like, football, NFL, NBA. And then you obviously have the ability to look at different categories. So for example, if I do click on business, I'm going to get the different business shows, or click on, health or sports or whatever the case may be. We also have some really helpful filters within the system. So for example, if you wanted to look at demographics, which are based on the demographics that I showed you earlier from the publisher side, they can go in and say, hey, you know what, I'm looking for, shows that maybe skew female or male or age, income, etc. And that'll actually filter the shows down based on those parameters. As an advertiser, one of the things that becomes really useful is seeing, hey, what's new? Like what are some things I should be thinking about? If I'm buying a bunch of shows ongoing here with AdvertiseCast, maybe I want to look at and say, hey, what's come up in the last 30 days that I should be aware of? And hey, there we go, Dave's amazing podcast. And so as an advertiser, I can go in, here's the show that I want to take a look at. I can click on the listing here, and you'll see that I've got the kind of the basic details that I need to take a look at in terms of figuring out what's going on here. Got the description of the show, link to the Apple Podcast link. This show publishes on Monday. You've got some past advertisers that they've worked with, and that actually dynamically shows up in the system based on the different campaigns that have actually run, through the show. And then we've got what's available for sale. And one of the things we always try to do is help out, the user in terms of what are they looking at here with these little tool tips. You can see here's the amazing looking host here with details about the host. And then we also have the ability to actually take a look at, hey, let's take a look at some recent episodes here. Let's click on these and listen to those and hear what the show is all about. What I don't have showing up here, because this is a pretty new listing, is it actually can have some featured ad spots as well. That'll just kind of cycle through here to say, hey, let's take a look at how does he do these ad reads? What do they sound like? And they'll just show up kind of featured ad spots here
That's fantastic.
based on different campaigns, because that's a request that's always difficult. In the early days, somebody would say, hey, shoot me over a couple ad spots from this show, and we'd have to go digging through the system. So we basically automated that so you can actually go in and easily share those or easily have them pop onto the screen here.
I think that is such a powerful feature, and it sounds so trivial, but the amount of times I hear from someone that's just like, look, that podcast was such a perfect fit. The host was so excited and the demographics match perfectly. And then they cut to the ad, and this is the mattress that I have
Exactly.
in my guest room. And it's like, if that intensity that got people interested in the show, that got you interested in the show, doesn't carry over, it doesn't matter, right? Like, you might as well bought announcer read, way bigger reach than specifically looked at that show. So seeing that is so powerful. The demographics, everything you're showing here, what I love about this is that you guys are vetting the data. You're asking for a lot of data at a minimum, but you're giving people a valid reason on why they should do this. I mean, I think one of the bigger things as a publisher that I would love to see here is this view. Mimic it, right? As I'm entering it in my publisher view, show me what I look like to an advertiser so I can see how many holes I'm leaving by not adding additional data, because this is the type of powerful things that you just don't think of in that moment. You're like, I don't have a survey. It takes too much effort.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you that if you poll your advertisers, the self-serve advertisers, this demographic info is probably a major pull for what makes them try out a show.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea, Brian. And it's one of those things where it's a balance, because we try to make it like, hey, we only need the basics here. But like
Yeah.
you said, it would be great to say to the podcaster, hey, you know what? If you add this and this and this, like, that's going to take your your listing from like a B- to an A+, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be really attractive.
Yeah,
So I love that concept.
you pull Clippy back up and it says, did you know 30% more podcasts sell if they have the
Exactly.
demographic info?
That's it.
Like,
That's it.
well,
Perfect.
this is really great. I mean, you make it really easy for someone to say, yeah, this is the show I want, and buy right away.
Yep.
And then you provide a lot of other information here. This is something that if I were to sign up, I'm able to see some of this data at the entry point. But as you said, as I start to spend more, as I start to interact with your team more and show that I'm serious about interacting here, you're going to add more and more data for me to go through.
Yeah, exactly. And then keep in mind, behind all of this, from an advertiser's perspective, like, we have a team, right? There's a lot of great people waiting to help you, and that's why we have this. Hey, I'm not quite sure about this, or like, I have some questions. Just put in your details, boom, it'll shoot it off to the sales team, and we can help you out, right? So
And
in this case, let's say, so go ahead.
Well, that's the big difference between a marketplace and programmatic, right? They both solve similar functions. Is it possible to buy an ad on every single AdvertiseCast show all at once, all host read? Absolutely. Is that something that you could do programmatically? No. What it needs is people involved to facilitate different aspects here. And so the difference between a marketplace and programmatic is that, does there have to be a human involved on every step? No. Can there be? Yes. Should there be as it gets bigger? Absolutely. And so that's the upgrade there. Whereas programmatic, it is meant to be completely hands off, and it's just not built for hands to enter in and fix situations. So that's why marketplaces really excite me as our scale point in podcasting.
Yep, for sure. And like you said, there's a lot of nuances to these things. So even in this case, if I put in an order for 10 shows, like, one of the hosts might want to do something this way, and the other host might want to do something this way, because, it means different things to them. So that's the complexity of it. So in this case, let me just grab, 4 of these ad spots here from the Dave's Amazing Podcast. Keep in mind, I have the ability to add as many of these shows to a campaign, as I want. In this case, maybe I'll pick, another show here, Darknet Diaries. fantastic show. And I'll put in, a couple of spots with Jack here, add those. And basically I can just go and take a look at the order itself. So I've added these 2 shows to my order. Very simply, I can put in the campaign name, so I got my, I don't know, summer 2022 campaign. I can put in my, details here. Obviously, we give some guidance in terms of what the details should be. Hey there, we are excited to work with you, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, the more details, the better. I do have the ability to request dates in here as well, but very often an advertiser will say, hey, I'd like to run these within the months of July and August, ideally every 2 weeks or something like that. And then they can leave it up to the podcaster to actually slot that in the availability calendar. I have the ability to upload say a brief or talking points here as well. And then I can actually choose if I want to get invoiced or if I have a credit card on file. I mean, this might be a little too big for the old credit card here. But I can then just click accept the terms. Of course, they might want to read the terms here as well, and then go ahead and actually order that campaign. And what happens there is that actually goes out obviously to the podcaster in the dashboard that I just showed you on the publisher side, and then that workflow gets kicked off. And so that's kind of the simple workflow in terms of actually placing the ad buy there.
I'm such a big fan of that. I like marketplaces. Marketplaces are so great. Every podcaster that is selling ads, that any marketplace that they're eligible for, they should be listed in, because by participating in a marketplace, you show that company, that partner, how dedicated you are, how much you can grow, how effective you can be in ads, and you lead a path towards them wanting to bring you on board potentially for exclusive. You
Yeah,
work with these
absolutely.
advertisers who get to know you and get to know success, and all the advertisers talk, and especially the ones on the same platform. So if an advertiser finds success with a show, sometimes they'll keep it to themselves, but I've seen a lot of them start to share that information because they want to grow as much as possible. So
Yeah.
this is a really cool setup, and it's straightforward with the ability to ask for additional assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like we always say, I mean, one of the challenges obviously for advertisers in the podcast ecosystem is that it's hugely fragmented, right? And so if you have a great podcast that's doing, 100,000 downloads an episode, is the perfect advertiser going to find your podcast if you're just like a person doing a podcast totally independently? Maybe, but maybe not. And what we always tell the podcasters who are maybe not even exclusive with us is that if you get on our platform, you're going to get a lot more at bats in front of a lot more advertisers,
Yes.
because guess what? If somebody Googles podcast advertising, like we're on the top few results that are going to come up. And then there's a great chance that if your show is a good fit, then that advertiser is going to find you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
podcasting is all about working with aggregators. There's a reason we're on Spotify, Amazon, Google, and Apple. It's because sometimes, even though it's possible for people to find you directly, they want to work through the tools that they're familiar with. So that's the same thing here. Ad buyers are going to use the tools that they're familiar with. They're going to work with the people they're familiar with. Even the ones that really branch out and do it themselves on like a micro buy, they spend a substantial amount of effort into doing that. And so
Mhm.
I don't think that that's going to become the norm. I think we're going to see networks and marketplaces and programmatic be the easiest way to find and meet new publishers, and then it grows from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and so on the advertiser side, just like I have on the podcast side of the coin, I also have some capabilities here, like a dashboard. So I can go in my dashboard, see what's going on, see all the shows that I'm working with, and kind of dive into those details. So as an example here, I might want to look at, this specific campaign here. I can actually take a look and say, hey, it looks like Dave's been, working on this. He's actually completed, one of the spots out of the 4. I can listen to that air check if I want to. And then I have the ability again to communicate directly with the show. Great job on the first spot. Fantastic. Everybody loves to get positive feedback, right? The other thing which is really great from the advertiser's perspective is that we always capture addresses for the hosts, so that if they want to send out product, here it is. You don't need to go and ask them for it. It's all right in the system. If they're on a campaign, you have access to that address. You can send them out product or samples, anytime. And Again, if they need to update the ad copy, anything related to the campaign, you can do that, right within the system here.
Awesome.
If you want to get a consolidated look at all of your air checks, this is where you can do that. Obviously, I only have a couple here, but this gives me the ability to actually go in and actually just listen to those right within the system. The other thing to note is that the advertisers can opt in to receive certain email notifications. So if they want to get an email every time an air check is actually loaded into the system, they can get that as well. So they can get them right in their inbox, click, listen to it, on the fly, and give that feedback directly to the show. You can see here, speaking of that, I'm actually getting emails in my test account here. That email from Susie there saying great job. The other side, you can take a look at kind of on the financial side of things, hey, what you've booked, what you've paid. You can access all of your invoices and receipts, from all of the campaigns that you're running within the system. So again, we try to put that out there directly in their account so that they can kind of answer all those questions that they might have for our finance team directly within the system. So yeah, I mean, from the advertiser side of things, that's a quick, overview of the capabilities that they've got at their fingertips. This is definitely something that we're looking to, kind of provide some more functionality around, because right now, self-serve is still a smaller portion of our overall business. Our team actually still does, manage quite a few campaigns for a lot of our different advertisers. But what we're adding right now is kind of some bridge capabilities to say, hey, we're managing this campaign for you, but instead of us giving you a great report showing you all of what's going on, just log in, take a look here, and you'll start to see, the power of actually having direct access to the system, so that they're going to say, hey, what else can I do here? Oh, I can actually go in and find shows and place buys and renew campaigns. And we think that kind of bridge concept is going to bring a lot more, interest into the self-serve side of things. And we're already seeing, several, advertisers and quite a few of our agencies actually saying, hey, you know what, we do want to get access directly into the system, because when a new show comes in, we want to get, first dibs on that for our brand. So
yeah,
that's been great.
I like that, because like the way you're talking about growing is fantastic, because as a publisher, being able to have the ability to maybe use this as order management for all of my campaigns, not just through what you're selling directly, but manage my self-sold or manage anything else, would be really helpful. But on an advertiser side, I mean, if I hit a point where I'm looking for more and more, and I'm just like, hey, what you built for me is awesome, I want to explore, I found some shows, that's fantastic, I would like more business shows. That gives the prompt, that gives the ability for AdvertiseCast to have very clear direction on where to expand, what shows and categories have the most interest. Because when you're building a plan, you're building with the tools that you have available. But when an advertiser is exploring, they'll absolutely let you know when they hit a brick wall, when they need more than what you have available. And that's great feedback for growth too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I mean, Bryan,
Well,
that's really it. I mean, in terms of the platform itself, obviously, this is really focused on like the host read, side of things, and that's really
yeah.
been our, bread and butter since day one. I will mention that from the kind of like the Advertise Cast, as part of Libsyn, we are working on some other tools for publishers hosted on Libsyn, more on like the automated, programmatic side that'll be, announced in the coming months. We really see that as kind of a supplement to the host read side of things, obviously, which is, kind of, secondary in that waterfall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a no-brainer. Marketplaces are something that every hosting platform or every publisher, regardless of their hosting platform, should be working with. I think it extends your reach substantially. And advertisers, this is a great place to get used to podcast buying a little bit more hands-on before you evaluate if programmatic works for you, or in supplement to your agency or direct buying, one-to-one on shows. So I am always recommending marketplaces to everybody, specifically AdvertiseCast Marketplace. I think it is a solid solution, and I hope everybody on the publisher side and advertiser side checks it out soon.